Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today, taking some time out of your busy schedules to join the conference and this talk in specific. Much appreciate. Trusting the Scrum team and bridging the gap between vision and execution. So we're going to spend the whole next hour looking at that content that I've put together a while ago. So I move over to my thing here. There we go. So my name is ClaudioLassala. You have my email up there if you would like to reach out after the talk. Maybe you have questions. Maybe you put some of that knowledge into practice and you want to like just reach out and have an ongoing conversation. Please do so. I'm a technical director here with Improving in Houston. I've been involved with building software since the mid-90s, being all the way from the DOS days to current moment. So I've been around for a while. You can see some of my areas of passion there on my business card, as well as some of the photos, which can tell you that I keep a very, some people say, interesting life besides, writing code and building software and all that kind of fun stuff. Questions? For questions, please, as you have them, just drop it in the Q&A feature of the platform here. I'll be monitoring those questions as they come in. And then when I find good spots to just have a little break and take the question, I'll do so. Excellent. This thing, slides are, oh, there we go. Is there trust is a question that we get asked between the Scrum team, or is there trust as a delivery team, however you call the team who's building software to aid the business in their strategical goals? Without having trust, the Scrum team cannot do the right things right for the business, meaning writing good code, providing the proper or best architecture for the software that's being built. Without trust, the business leadership cannot really leverage a strategic alliance with the team that they've assembled to put the software, the services together. So during this talk, I'll be sharing some of the lessons that I've personally learned over the course of years to bridge that gap, like shorten that gap between what the business needs and the vision that they have and what the Scrum team is actually doing here. Sometimes, locked in a room, lots of planning, lots of, writing code, and then there's this huge gap in between. So how do we tighten or we close that gap? Where I've identified that there's a disconnect is that you have on one side the real world, real people, customers, providers, and then a business that's trying to serve that real world. And the business has a vision as to what kind of services, what kind of tools, what kind of products they're offering to the real world. On the other side of the equation, we have the people who are going to be executing that vision. So behind an IT group, you have, let's narrow it down to the development team. And then you have tech stacks, and you have processes and languages and practices such as test-driven development or design, behavior-driven development, and so on. And then there's a huge wall in between. I come from a time when I used to say we used to do pizza-driven development, where the business would come up with a vision that they want executed. They would assemble a team of developers, people who would be building the software. They would feed requirements to this team, lock the team in a room, slide some pizza under the door every once in a while, knock at the door and say, "You guys still alive? Are we done yet?" Right? And that could take months, sometimes even years, until the developers would come back and say, "Okay, here's the software ready." But then by then, it would be too late because the world has moved on, the business and the requirements and the rules have moved on too little, too late. So that's not a great way to approach that kind of project. Another thing that comes from my previous experience, and as I understand, current teams today are still doing that, where you had this separation, even within the development team, you had this separation where you have developers, meaning the coders, the people writing the implementation code, and you have your QA folks, the testers. And we would bring or build this wall in between where the developers are writing the code. Eventually they're done. They toss the software over the fence for the testers to try it out, to then find bugs, toss it over the fence and say, okay, here you guys fix these things, without much communication, even within the same team, which is a very common problem that we see, where the people writing the code, the implementation code, they spend maybe 2 weeks in a 2-week sprint building the system. And then like the day before the last day of the sprint, they turn it over to QA, who had never seen the new feature yet. And now they have to figure out, where does it live? What does it look like? How is it supposed to work? Right? What am I giving here? Not a great kind of interaction there. There's really no interaction. So we need to approximate, even within the same group, we need to make that approximation. I also come from a time when we used to call certain types of developers the rockstar developer. That's all we need, right? If the team is not doing too well, or if we got some juniors in the team, and then we need at least one rockstar developer, the person who's going to come in, make it all happen, and then move on. Well, there's not such a thing as a rock star developer. There are rock stars, those folks who make, music, and they come into town, they put on a great concert, they may go back to the hotel, destroy the hotel, right? Leave a lot of damage, and then move on to the next city, right? That's the stereotypical figure of a rock star. Developers shouldn't be like that. Developers should come in, listen, understand what are the problems that we're trying to solve, hopefully grow those around them, grow the business, and then depending on the kind of interaction or role that developer has, move on to other things, or just move up within the organization. Reason why I bring a lot of these things up is that for years, we have been looking at, say, requirements in the sense of the business requires the development team to build the following. So they may say, hey, the requirement states that we want a delete button on that screen. So we are dealing with, orders. It's a restaurant, and then we are allowing the customer to place an order. Oh, now we need to add a delete button to the order. Well, why would you use that, right? Oh, because you're going to delete the order. Well, no, you're probably going to be canceling the order or something like that. You don't walk into a restaurant, place your order, and then 10 minutes later, you receive a call, you need to step out, and you're going to tell your waiter, oh, yes, I would like to delete my order. We don't talk like that. Developers do, right? We're deleting everything, but that's not really what the business operation is. But that's how it used to be. Business asks for a delete button. Developers say, that's easy. Put the button there, issue a delete statement against the database, and then you destroy that data, right? It's a weird dynamic, right? Think about it. In the real world, we don't talk like that. You don't have a business owner, a company owner walk up to an employee and say, you have been deleted, right? They're going to say, you've been fired, you've been promoted, you've been transferred to another branch of our company. Never delete, right? Oh, but this guy does not work with us, or this gal does not work with us anymore. Okay, you're not deleting them. There is a business process that goes with that. It's not just adding a button to say, oh, I want to click on this button, and when I click on this button, I don't want to see that record anymore, right? It's not like that. So we need to bridge that kind of gap. And then some folks might think, well, so Scrum to the rescue. Yes, that's how we address this gap between the business and the technical folks. So we introduced the role of a product owner in between, right? So the product owner being the bridge between the vision, the business, and the execution, the development team. And that's great. It's obviously great to have like this one captain of the ship who knows where we are going, who can see ahead where we are aiming to go. Problem is that a lot of folks have now been seeing product owners as a shield between the technical folks and the non-technical folks. Not great, right? Because I've worked with developers that they're just thankful to the product owners because them, the developers, don't have to like interact with the people that they are actually building software for. Not the best way to approach problem solving, right? To see the development team, the technical folks as allies to the business. So instead, why don't we find a common ground between the two realms? So instead of having like the two solid colors with a wall in the middle and then a little bridge, why don't you see that more as a gradient? So if you're on the far left, you're really closer to the real world, the people, the customers, the stakeholders who you're trying to serve. On the far right, you have, like in this image, the technical stuff, but don't have like the developers sitting all the way over on the right all the time. Bring them into this middle ground where everybody can collaborate. And that does not mean that, like I've heard from fellow developers one time or another. Oh yeah, when we're there with the business folks, the non-technical folks, we have to dumb down our spiel, right? Meaning you're not going to use the technical terms and the deep, crazy things that you're doing. It's like, no, buddy, you're not dumbing down anything. They're not, less smart than you. They just don't know the technical stuff that you know, that you do, just like you don't know the business terms. So they also, from that perspective, they would also have to dumb down their business terms so that the technical folks can catch up, right? So that's not the kind of relationship we want. We want to bring these people together where they find this language that is in a common ground so that everybody there in that realm of things can understand what the others are saying. So when the business says this is important, the developers understand why that is important. If the developers say, well, such technical decision is important, make it so that the business will understand from the business perspective, why is that important, right? Are there cost-related decision factors that we should take into account? Or is there value that, yeah, that costs a lot, but the value, overweights the cost? So we have to create this kind of type of common ground to bring people together. Do we remove the product owner? Absolutely not, right? The product owner is still there, the vision, the captain of the ship, but we are spreading more of this knowledge so that's not all on the product owner. Now your Scrum Master, your UX designers, your coders, they hear a little bit closer from the source, what is it that we're trying to solve, right? To whom does it matter? So a common question that I get from businesses and from business people is, hey, Claudio, how can I get the best out of my development team, right? So that's as I ask them to do things, we have less round trips between giving them requirements and getting back what we actually need. How do we streamline this conversation? Usually followed by, what language should I learn to best communicate with them? And by that, they mean, should I learn Java? Should I learn JavaScript? Should I learn C#, Python, Ruby, whatever, right? I've had non-technical folks be proud that like, oh yeah, I've learned how to write some T-SQL, right? So that I can run some queries against our database. That is great, right? It does give you a little bit of insight on how some developers think, but that's not what's going to help streamlining the conversation and the collaboration. I'm originally from Brazil. People I interact with, oftentimes trying to be nice to create, some sort of bond, they will learn how to speak some words in Brazilian Portuguese, like saying bom dia to greet me in the morning, or good morning. That's great, beautiful. But we cannot rely on them learning Brazilian Portuguese so that we can streamline our conversation from their own. That's not gonna help. So same thing for a non-technical person to learn JavaScript, for example, that is really not gonna be that helpful to streamline that conversation and collaboration. So usually my answer to those questions is English, just, plain old English. It may sound like a joke, but I'm not saying learn Shakespearean English, because that does not help either. It's just learning how to find the most clear, intent revealing English so that everybody in that common ground room are understanding each other, right? When somebody says, oh, we need to place an order, people are going to go like, place an order like, you must do this. Or, yes, I'm at the restaurant and I would like to place my order. Order, still the same word in everybody's vocabulary, but the meaning changes based on the context. So that level of English, that's what I usually say. Make sure that as you put together your requirements or your user stories, you're using concise communication through the spoken language that the team and the people involved are using. Common challenges that we hear from and we run into with development teams is 3 that I've identified. Lack of skills or knowledge. That could be in the technology that was chosen for the problem we are trying to address, or lack of skills and knowledge in the industry. Maybe this person has been a software developer for 20 years and has worked in the healthcare industry forever, and now they're trying to work in oil and gas. So they have very limited knowledge in that area. So that is a problem, right? You have a lack in that area that needs to be worked on. Requirements, right? Maybe not enough requirements, or the requirements that we're getting are insufficient in the sense that we're not quite understanding where we're going with that. Maybe the user stories in the way that they are written is not really clarifying the intent behind what we're trying to build. And then last but not least, the time, right? Like, well, we just don't have enough time to pull off what we are being asked. So how do we address the lack of, in any of those areas? Current skills and knowledge, we can all learn, we can all grow, right? Over time, we can get better at the technology, the tech stack that we're using. We can get better at the industry that we are now serving. Requirements, we can collaborate. So I've been learning to essentially do the following. When the development team says, well, we didn't deliver exactly what the business needed because the requirements were not that great. So I challenge, okay, what would make the requirements better? If we receive, say, a user story, and that story was unclear, developer person, how would you rewrite that story to make it more revealing, to add clarification to the story, right? So started getting developers to actually write user stories, because sometimes the product owner may be already fighting his or her own battles, and they may, if they don't get the feedback that, hey, the user stories are not really telling us what we need to do, have everybody on the team actually contributing to writing, better requirements or stories, in the sense that if the stories are written in this manner with this kind of information, we're going to have less round trips between what the business asks, what the development team delivers. And time, we can make better use of it, because we all get the same 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no way to get more time. You just can use your time more efficiently. If you improve your skills, your knowledge, if you improve your requirements and you decrease the gap between what the business needs and what the developers deliver, you're making better use of your time. And that's an important thing. Quick tip, products aren't usually built in one sprint, right? You usually have multiple sprints. So you have a chance to ramp up your skills, your knowledge, improve your requirements, and that way you're making better use of your time. And then requirements, right? When we say we write requirements, we're prescribing the solution. And that usually comes at a cost of, well, yeah, that's not necessarily what we need. Like adding a delete button to a screen that we don't really want to delete the thing. We want to perform some sort of business activity. Because you ask for a delete button, you prescribe, we require a delete button, that's what you get. You ask for a wall, you get a wall. And then different developers may build different walls, right? Well, if the developers building that wall don't know what the wall is going to be used for, there's like a million types of walls that could come up. Like, well, no, I just want to have a wall to separate two rooms, or I want to hang some, family portraits, or I'm stupidly rich and I have a Formula One car that I want to hang sideways on that wall. You need to know what is the intent for that thing. What is the value out of this thing that you're telling me to build? And then the developers, well, we should develop, right? Provide the best solution to the problem we're trying to address. So when we scratch that idea of requirements and we go back to the notion of user stories, it goes back to, you've probably heard it before. User stories are placeholder for conversation. What goes on the user story should spark that conversation. It should spark questioning for better understanding of what is the problem that we're trying to address and how can we better collaborate. Maybe it's not just one person working on building that feature. Maybe it's the person coding, it's the QA person helping identify the edge cases and how we're going to be putting things together. And it's the UX designer trying to find better ways to maybe go towards a human-centric kind of design where we're trying to build something that's going to help the human person get something done, right? Ultimately, that's why we build software, to help other people, like real people. Clarifying context is something that I deem extremely necessary. As I've mentioned, words will have different meaning based on the context around them. So I've been in the US for about 20 years now, just about to turn 20 years now. And in any social situation, if I overhear somebody saying, oh yeah, last night was great, we went to the football game, immediately what comes to my mind is football. That is the image that gets projected in my mind, right? Well, Claudio, after 20 years, you should know that they actually mean this other thing. Now, how would I know? Again, it's closing the gap now after so many years. Still the image at the top is what comes to mind first. And then it takes me a little while to switch into what they actually mean is not soccer, it's American football. But I need that mental parser every time, right? Or even depending on who I'm having that conversation, maybe some of my friends from South America. So they do, even though they said football, they did mean soccer, right? But until somebody clarifies that context, I don't know. My mind may go different ways, thinking one thing when everybody else in the room is talking about something else. What does that have to do with anything? Let's pretend or assume that there is a user story that says, hey, well, I need something where I can enter two numbers and I want to add up those numbers and I want to see a result. That's pretty simple, right? Developer will say, yep, here, hold my beer. I'm going to turn that over to you in like half hour or whatever, right? Well, that's not enough, because instead of just saying, oh, I'm going to build this thing where you can enter two numbers, add them up and show the result, you should ask, what is the meaning of those two numbers? Because it could be that they're adding to like money, currencies, and they're adding US currency to Mexican currency, right? And the result, they may want to see in Canadian currency, right? Still just numbers, but there's deeper meaning behind each one of those numbers. Also, you may have the following: the person entering those numbers, maybe they are given US currency, Mexican currency, and they want to see the result in Canadian currency. But the people consuming that information, they may want to see that in Japanese currency, right? So you need to ask these questions. Who has the numbers? In which format, or what is the meaning for each one of those numbers to them? How do they want to enter it? How do they want to see it? The other people who are going to be consuming that, do they care about the different splits, or do they want to say, hey, just show me that in US dollars, right? You have to ask those questions, because that adds complexity, of course, to the solution, but it also adds more guarantee that when you deliver the feature, it will actually serve the people who are going to be using that, right? So take with a grain of salt anything that's like, oh, that's just a tiny little story. It's just some crud, right? You just have to enter that information. No, there's probably more. Ask the question, why is that valuable? How does it relate to the overall context? Story mapping is another technique that comes in handy, where you start thinking of what it is that you're building in terms of what are the customer segments that we are catering for. Like in this example here that we have on the slide, you have customers, sales reps, you have fulfillment vendors, you have network operator, and so on, right? And then what is the value proposition? What is the value that the business is proposing to those segments through the service or the software that they're building? And then here you have like goals, managing orders, managing fulfillment of those orders, managing provisioning, activation, and billing. And that happens over time. So you can see from left to right, you take one goal of this business and what are the activities, the business activities that might happen there. And each one of those goals, they can split into separate business activities. I was jumping ahead of myself there, where for managing orders, you may need to enter orders and process orders. Managing fulfillment, you need to process fulfillment of that order, submitting it to fulfillment vendors, tracking shipping in progress. So those are activities associated with the overall business goal. And then you have the different features that enable those activities. So like entering an order, you can decompose that into the following features. Entering the order info, submitting the order, viewing the order, submitting the order with an accessory, save order info, update, do this, do that. So the green little cards, those are the user stories. So this aggregate of user stories add up to that activity, right? And then once you have that kind of view, you can see from left to right the sequence of like real world and business events and activities that happen and how it all ties together. When we have this kind of view, you can also allow the product owner, the business folks to decide how to prioritize this. Do we want to slice that horizontally, like maybe doing that first row of green features there, right? So you're saying, I'm gonna go beginning to end, only that first row. I wanna enter the order info, submit the order, receive the order, submit it to fulfillment. Like, so that means that we would be able to enter the order, but not edit, like change that order. That's fine. Maybe that may be the priority to the business because they're looking at this workflow beginning to end. Or it may be vertically. Oh, no, let's first do the first green column on the left, where we want to enter the order info, be able to view the order, save, update, and all that. Having this view, you can have this kind of communication and explain to the people involved, why is it important to us to have, you know, either horizontal slicing as far as the priorities go, or vertical slicing. With that, we can actually deliver the proper results. When we say, the development team says, we are done with the features that we've agreed on for this sprint, for this release, the results that you deliver relate directly to the business goals as per priorities and all those things. By the way, I'm monitoring the Q&A feature there. If you do have questions, comments, or anything you would like to drop, make sure to use the feature there. Otherwise, I just keep rolling. Have the conversations. So when you have user stories, right? Placeholder for conversations, right? It's not like you're putting that on a user story, you know, it's a written in stone and nobody can change that. No. That's to spark conversations. I'm a big advocate of, instead of going the SA, I want to, so that, flip that around and start the story with the most important thing, the problem that you're trying to solve here. So like in this case, in order to save on mailing costs of marketing initiatives, That's very business oriented. This is the problem that the business is trying to address. So let's start with that, right? It's not like we're building a narrative to a multi-arc, Marvel movie. I love those, but that's not the point of this story. We want to start with the end in mind, right? And then don't do the as a user. Like everybody who touches that software, we call them users, which we may even consider, why do we call them users? Not the best word there, but think from the human's perspective. Pretend you don't have computers. That person exists there in the company. What is that person? It's a marketing manager, an accountant, a buyer, a seller. That's how we should be referring to the person to whom we are trying to solve a problem here. And then what is the thing that they want to do? I want to send direct mail with no duplicate addresses. That's what they're trying to do. Notice the user story is not prescriptive. It's not telling us what buttons they want on the screen, whether they should be using drop downs or a regular list or a table. No, no, right? That would be prescriptive. We have something like this. It brings up room for the conversation where people can ask questions to better understand the problem and provide better solutions. From that, we can then start putting out the acceptance criteria for that one story. I'm a big advocate of the given, when, then format, which is also called gherkin format or language, however you want to say that. Given the current user is a marketing manager and duplicate addresses exist, when sending direct mail, then only unique addresses get mail. Why is that important? Well, because here we are putting boundaries around the feature that we are building. Well, it says, given the current user is a marketing manager. What if the current user is an accountant? Honestly, right now, we don't care, because that's not a problem we're trying to solve. This is the problem we are currently trying to solve. Focus, right? This is the only thing we need to address right now. And then you're going to create as many of these are necessary for the story. You may have different scenarios that you want to account for. If you have like 6 different scenarios, maybe those should be split into separate stories, right? Because you're trying to do too much with one story. So it also helps you see boundaries for prioritization, understanding the complexity of what we are building, how to break it down into smaller chunks that we can bite. From there, once we have good conversation around the user story, around the acceptance criteria, developers, this is something that I also advocate. We write tests, automated tests. Do you write tests, right? And if so, why? Many devs will say, well, this is the kind of test that I write, right? And then when asked why they are writing those tests, they'll probably say, oh, just to make sure that my code works. Oh, yeah, your code definitely has to work. That's what the business is paying you to write, code to. So that's not a great way to answer that practice of writing tests. Think about it. The test that you're seeing on the left is like a simple implementation of the acceptance criteria we had on the previous slide that we see on the screen now. We could rewrite that test in the following manner, right? The thing on the right, it's the same test as the one on the left, except that the one on the right, we're not looking at mock objects, stubs, and all that kind of fun stuff, right? We are looking at sentences that have some funny underscores and parentheses at the end, but from a non-technical perspective, anybody who has participated in a talk about that acceptance criteria, if they look at the test written like that, it's like, oh, they are bringing our conversation all the way into the code. That's good, right? That's how you win credibility, so that you don't have to justify all the time to the business. Why is it that you're spending time to write tests? Because now you can respond to that question by saying, I'm writing tests to make sure that I am describing our current understanding of the problem that we are trying to solve, right? Business folks, non-technical folks, they like that. Like, oh, they're listening, right? They're not just concerned with the technical stuff. They are also thinking about the problems we are trying to solve as a business. I can see that person as an ally, okay? You create transparency when you do that. Oftentimes, if I do not get, as a developer, if I do not get acceptance criteria written in that manner, that's fine. I'll write it myself, because I do believe in test-driven design. I do believe in behavior-driven development. So I will start with my tests at this level, the thing that you see on the right, something that resembles acceptance criteria. If I didn't get good acceptance criteria, I'll write what I believe will better communicate. And then before I actually implement the test, before I actually implement the feature, I'm going to run this by maybe my QA folks, maybe my business analyst, maybe my product owner, somebody in the business, say, hey, what I just wrote here, disregard the underscores. I know that it looks funny, but does that convey properly what it is that we're trying to build? They might say, not at all. Let's have the conversation. Well, good that I didn't spend more time creating database stuff and writing code to implement something that was wrong to begin with. We can, flush out the details here. Then I can move on and actually do the implementation. That's how we shorten that gap, where we bridge that gap between the requirements we were giving and the results that we delivered, right? Because by the time we deliver the results, we have a much better understanding of what is it that we're trying to address, right? Inspires confidence on the team. Like from the business, like, well, these guys, I don't understand the programming language thing, but I see that they are carrying the business conversation all the way into the code that you're building. Kind of like the subway model, right? You walk into a subway and you start asking the person, I want, this kind of bread, this kind of meat, this kind of, lettuce and so on. When you get that sub, it has to be pretty close to what you expected, because you've participated all along the way. In building software, if you can bring the non-technical folks with you along the way, all the way down to the, okay, now you're really down to the nuts and bolts and bits and bytes. Yeah, but at least we can have a collaboration and conversation all the way down there before we lose you with all the technical stuff, right? But look at how we are closing that gap between the two. So as you go write the code, also take into account that, you see something like trying to explain zero-based arrays to anybody who's not a developer is always a weird thing, right? Because you see months 1 equals January. That's what a non-technical person would think, right? The first month of the year is January. It's like, no, because it's zero-based. So January is month 0. Well, how come 0 is first and then first is second? Yeah, you're starting to get it. But come on, right? So let's make the code, write the code in a way that even if a non-technical person see your if statements, they can still follow along, right? Maybe if you follow English first, right? You have code that reads like this. If user is marketing manager, we're in the implementation of the feature, but we are bringing that business language into the code that we are writing. For the folks in domain-driven design, BDD, right? The ubiquitous language, the language of the business. Identifying what that is and bringing that all the way down to how we model our classes, our programming assets, if you will, and how we write the code. Like, well, but now we are hard coding it to, is marketing manager. Like, yeah, that's all we know at the time. We don't care about the other types of like accountants and sellers, not for this feature. That's all we have requirements for. So start with that. You have a new story that now you have to cater for. Well, if the user is an accountant, then, okay, then what? Let's describe that. There's a very specific need. It's not just, oh, we want to dynamically allow the user to set different things. And even if we do, even around all of that, the dynamic features, there's probably some boundaries around what the users can or cannot do, if that's a feature that you have to build. Identify those boundaries and push that language as far deep into your code as you can. Same thing with the, having a mailer and then send to unique addresses. Those things are coming, at least bits and pieces are coming straight out of the user story, the acceptance criteria, the conversations we've had in that common ground with the business folks, with the non-technical folks. Reviewing what we have so far, looking on my time here, make sure I'm on track. Get people around, listen first, have the conversation. Don't just like drop user stories and say, oh, that's in Jira, it's in Azure board. Just read the story and go to town. No, wait a minute. User story, placeholder for conversation. Have the conversations, listen. Maybe if you are the product owner who wrote a user story, don't just say like in a sprint planning, okay, in order to, I want to. And then like, no, listen to what the people in the room are going to be asking. And a very good practice is to have like the people who are going to be implementing that restating the user story, but not like word by word, their interpretation of the value of that story. Did they get the value? Do they understand why this is important? Besides just saying, oh yeah, you just need a list of sales orders. No. Why do they need that? Why is it important? Make sure they understand that. If the way that the words came out in the user story didn't quite relay the message, hear from how they are thinking to try to approximate the language so that next time there are going to be maybe less questions because everybody's like, oh yeah, I know what that means, right? And I have the proper the collective interpretation of what that means. Make sure that the vision that people will get in their minds is the vision that the business has. So if we're building something around like houses, maybe we're in real estate business. When somebody says a house, like in order to buy a house, do everybody in the room get the same image of a house? Because maybe this is a niche where they just say, well, we only do houses for the summer. That's our business. So when somebody thinks house, they shouldn't see like a house in the middle of the city. They should see a beach house or something like that, right? That's important to plant that image as quickly as possible. Once you've established like that, when you say, and the way, the reason why I bring this up, 20 years ago, the first time, as I first moved to the US, I have worked on features that were like CRUD-based features, like you just want to be able to create a new record in a table, so you're going to populate it with some data, save it, retrieve it, delete, edit, and all that stuff. And I worked on features, and I think it's the first time I say this out loud, that maybe to this day, nowadays, I guess I know what those things mean, but back then, I didn't even know what the things meant, right? Like, oh, it's a CRUD screen for blah, whatever that thing is. And I would develop the whole feature. You can create, you can retrieve, you can update, you can delete. If you ask me to explain what that thing was at the time, I would go like, I don't even know that thing. I looked up that word on a dictionary. It didn't tell me much. And at the time, I just couldn't relate. I couldn't see whenever somebody said that word, the noun for that thing, I would see that data entry screen. That's what I would see. I would not see the real world thing that the actual people would see, that they would have in front of them as they were using the system. Not a good thing. Okay, years later now, I have to tell you, that's not a good thing. You have to plant that vision so that the people writing the code, when you say a buyer, what is the image that comes to their mind, right? What is the situation? Where are those buyers working? Are they working off of a coffee shop or at their back office with two big monitors on a standing desk? And that, you have to have that kind of image, showing up in the people's minds. Discuss through the acceptance criteria. Okay, for the feature, acceptance criteria should show you the boundaries of the feature that we are trying to build. Clarify expectations so that when you say we are done with the feature, can you check those boxes? Does it do these things? Oh, it doesn't do all of the things in the world because we are just setting it down to these expectations. Do the testing, right? Write the test so you have automated tests that will tell you. It will help you track progress. Are we done yet? Are we done yet? Hold on, let me see. For the expectations there, we have 10 tests. I have 5 of them that are failing. The other 5, I'm sorry, that are pending, meaning they have not been implemented. The other 5 are implemented and passing, right? It's easier for you to see what is the progress that we're making in those stories. Keeping commitments, right? You have the expectations, you have tests that will tell you, yeah, when they all pass, you're keeping the commitment to deliver the feature as described through the expectations. When you do share the results, right, you demonstrate the value that you've brought to the team, to the business in a sprint review, for example. You demonstrate what's being built. Different people will chime in with things that are important about the feature that was built. During retro, we're going to discuss what went well in this sprint, what were the lessons learned, what things could we consider, trying it different to make it even better next time. Demonstrate respect during those conversations. You may have like a developer on the team that did the best they could with considering the current level of knowledge or skills that they have in the tech stack or in the industry. They've done their best given the requirements that they were given, the user story, the acceptance criteria, their interpretation of what they were given. And they've also done the best with the time they had at hand, right? So demonstrate respect, listen to, the things that people are putting out there, and then identify ways to get better, right? If you are like this amazing, like senior, principal level type of developer who would know ways to do that feature better, to implement that feature better, well, great for you. Help out the other developer, right? I see that as an area of improvement and say, hey, that's great. Now that I see where you are, right, I think I can help you take you to the next level, not, make you jump to your level, your junior level to my amazing level. It's like, no. Help that person take their next step, right? Build that trust within the team like that. It does wonders to every team. Look at the collaboration or collaborative zone, right? So that area in the middle that I've mentioned, like with that gradient, use plain English, right? Like, well, you are a highly technical person and you know all the things about the bits and bytes. Well, when you're in that common ground, right in the middle, you have to not dumb down. You have to adjust your the way you're communicating to the audience. Know your audience. If you're explaining to other developers on your team how certain features are put together, yeah, go to town and still adjust your spiel, because maybe you have some developers who are not familiar with the technical things that you're using. Know your audience, adjust your talk to that. You're sharing that with the higher ups, the stakeholders, the business owners. Know your audience. Understand from their angle, how should you approach the things that you're trying to collaborate. Same thing from the business side, right? If folks are out there in the business, living in the real world, knowing firsthand how certain things are, knowing all of the terms, well, if they unload all of that on the Scrum team, we're gonna go like, I don't know, half of those things. Sorry, I don't do that every single day out there. Help me out, understand and find those building blocks so that we can have better conversation, better collaboration, to then deliver better results for whatever it is that the business is offering to the society. That was profound. Come on. Now we are talking, right? We are, once we build that level of trust within the people involved there, if the business, the stakeholders, the product owner, they trust the development team more, it opens up the room so that if the business says, I want you guys to build the following feature. Well, if the developers are listening, they could potentially come back and say, listening to what you're saying about the value here, what if instead of doing this, we do this other thing here as an alternative? Would that provide a better solution to the problem we are trying to solve, right? Sometimes the business folks might say, no, that's not at all. Or it would be like, can we even do that? Well, please, by all means, let's do that. So instead of going from the prescribing what we want built, open the conversation, let the developers chime in and say, yeah, we actually have technology and we know how to do the following. And then speak from the standpoint of it's going to be cheaper, it's going to yield better value, or it may cost a little bit more. Instead of getting it done in one sprint, it's going to take us two sprints. But this is the kind of value that will come with that approach. Okay, be able to articulate that. That's another thing that's a lot of developers are extroverted when talking to other developers, because we're all talking technical stuff, right? Unloading off the technical jargons. And then when we approach non-technical folks, the higher ups, the stakeholders, we're introverted, right? Because I don't know how to talk to that crowd. Well, if we make this approximation, we can start making that a possibility where everybody can have an area of comfort where they can safely talk to each other. You do that, you get a chance to grow those. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm missing a word there. I dropped the word. Grow those around us. So not just do the image of the rockstar developer that we used to use in the past, where the person is going to come in, wave their hands, and then things will just, by miracle, just work and then go away. It's like, no. Whoever's getting the stuff done is not just getting stuff done, but also growing those around them to become better over time. For devs, that would mean, maybe you have one guy on the team that is a TDD expert. There's a chance for that person to coach the other developers into that practice. There may be folks on the team who are not familiar with behavior-driven development, BDD. Well, there's one person who might be able to coach others around that in the practice. Maybe developers who are not used to writing clean code. They just get whatever, just get the feature done and move on to the next thing. Like, no, let's go back and apply some refactoring techniques, clean it up. Sometimes it may take 5 minutes and it's going to make the code better. Can we afford 5 minutes? Right? It's going to pay off in the long run. So have that as an opportunity to improve the quality of the solution that we are providing, as well as improving just the abilities and skill and knowledge of those around us. QA, right? Having QA help the coders, the developers identify bugs, of course, but if they have challenges, like maybe the QA folks are having a hard time testing certain features because they have to take so many steps and so go through a lot of intricate work, that if they express that as a problem, maybe the coders could say, oh, I can write a script for you to prepare the data so that you don't have to do all of that. Or maybe the QA is a manual tester, doesn't know how to do test automation. Maybe the developer could say, oh, I can learn how to use one of the tools for automated tests and show you how to do. And then you can start writing your own automated test. There's room for collaboration there. Getting them to think about given when then. What is it that you are given, right? Oh, in order to place an order, I need a product and I need customers, right? And when an order is placed, then what happens? right? Start thinking along those lines. Collaborating with UX designers. Some UX designers have developers bias where the UX actually represents some developer concepts, like adding a delete button to a screen, for example, right? That's not a great user experience because delete is a very technical term. It doesn't have much to do with the actual business activity. So having this collaboration, we can clear out those waters. Helping Scrum Masters and product owners to focus on the why of the story, extremely important. I will jump through this because we're approaching the tail end of the talk here. And then wrapping things up, and I keep watching the Q&A feature here. Again, if you have questions, please, this is a great moment to drop those in or comments while hopefully you're going to be typing. Wrapping things up here, building an environment of trust begins with you, right? So make sure that you are like following practices and behaviors that will build trust with those around you and the people you are serving. Behaviors and practices are essential. Identify, get to know what those behaviors and those practices are, and practice that on a daily basis. Even if you're the only person on the team doing that, you're the only person on the team writing tests or helping with the user stories, keep doing that. Eventually, it will catch on. Others will see you do it. They will, join you. Listen and collaborate all the time. You're not on this by yourself. Improve every day. Find opportunities to grow those around you, right? And that is it for this talk. I'm seeing some messages coming up. Apparently, some folks have enjoyed the talk. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, if you would like to reach out to further this conversation on the topic, you have my email up there on the screen. Just reach out to me. You have my blog address there, where I also post different write-ups around this kind of topic. So that's it. I thank you all very much for attending and have a wonderful rest of the day.